Hello, everyone. It is Monday, and I'm so excited to have you here with me. Or actually, it's Tuesday. I don't even know what day of the week it is, but welcome to Book Talk with Cara. And today I'm very excited because I get to introduce you to three of my friends who write the most amazing suspense, romantic suspense with all the layers that we love when we read that genre. So we have Patricia Bradley and Hallee Bridgeman. Or Hallee, I did it again, didn't I, Hallee? Hallee Bridgeman and Melissa Koslin. And I love all of these ladies' writing. But what we're going to start with is, Hallee, if you want to go first and tell us a little bit about the next book that's coming out.
So the book is called Honor Bound, and it's coming out from Revell on September 6th. And it's about the team leader of a Special Forces A team who has to rescue the vice president's daughter from the jungles of a fictional country in Africa, while warlords are trying to capture her. And she has two wounded Special Forces soldiers she's trying to keep alive while they trek through the jungle.
And this book is so intense. It starts fast and it is so intense. I feel like I am literally in the wilds of Africa with them as they're trying to survive. So it is so well done.
Thank you.
So Melissa, do you want to tell us about your next one? And I've endorsed both of your books. They are fantastic. But let's tell everyone else about them.
Dangerous Beauty is coming out also September 6th from Revell. Yay. And it is, again, a romantic suspense. It's about a woman who is trafficked out of Mexico, and she ends up being brought over the border, and she ends up in Texas, and she manages to get away from her captors, but in order to stay in the country and to stay safe, she ends up having a marriage of convenience. I usually don't do tropes, but I just really love this one. This one just kind of got into my head and just took root, and I could not write it. So, and there's a whole lot more secrets and backgrounds and.
Yeah, another one that's really richly layered, but I also loved how you took a trope, something that we see in a lot of books, marriage of convenience, and you made it very fresh and unique and different. So it was a really great book. And Patricia, what's coming next for you?
Deception, the fourth book in the, is that backwards?
Nope.
But it's the fourth book in the Natchez Trace Park Rangers, and it's about Madison Thorne. And when I created her, I thought she's going to be a thorn in Clayton's side, and she was. So it's just the fourth book.
Yeah, that's fun. And all of yours, I love how atmospheric they are. Actually, all of you, that's one of the strengths of your writing, is that as a reader, I am firmly embedded in the story. So, and I can, whether it's looking up in the trees for the cobra that's going to fall on my head, or being in Louisiana where there's all the humidity and all of that. How do you decide, where your book's going to be set? Does it come from plot, from characters, from just wanting to go explore a location? What comes first for you? So Melissa, we'll start with you.
Well, mine was really just the logistics of, human trafficking so often comes from the southern border. So I thought, okay, well, it makes sense that she'll end up in Texas. So, and then we go to some various other places around the country, but that's where that came from.
And Patricia, you keep going back to Natchez. Why that location?
Okay, you broke up on me. Natchez, the location was chosen for me by my editor. I wanted to set a book on the Natchez Trace, and she loved the sound of Natchez and the town. She Googled it, and so that's where it was. And since I'd never been there, I was really excited to put it there. It's a lovely town.
That's awesome. Well, and you've set several books there, and they've all been really wonderful. And Hallee, Africa. Why Africa? Out of all the places you could have set this Special Forces team, why was that the place that grabbed you and said, there's got to be a book here?
I think because I wanted to take them out of the desert, because in the next book and in the next series, they're going to be in the desert the whole time. So I wanted something to kind of give something different from what we're seeing with Special Forces stories right now.
Yeah, well, and it definitely was. And And it has that, having been to Africa, although I was in Kenya over January, it was interesting to see, have a book set there, and you've got so many different geopolitical things that you can pull off of, which definitely came to light in this story. So why romantic suspense? Out of all the genres you could be writing, and I know, Hallee, you write in multiple genres, but why this series in that particular genre? So Pat, we'll start with you.
Well, that's all I ever read. Growing up, I liked Phyllis Whitney. I liked, and then along came, when I was a little bit older, along came Mary Higgins Clark. And so I just naturally wrote what I like to read.
Yeah, and I think a lot of us, that's often advice that we get or that we give, you should be reading what you write. Was that the case for you, Melissa, or did you get attracted to it by something, another means?
I actually don't read a lot of romantic suspense, oddly enough. I'm always so scared that I'm going to like end up pulling somebody else's something out of their book and put it in mine and just lose. Yeah, so I don't know. It's not something I read a lot, but mine, I guess I lean towards suspense because I'm a 4th degree black belt. So I'm always going to want to put some kind of fight scenes in there. And then of course, I'm just a little bit of a romantic. So they smooshes together.
That's awesome. And that black belt definitely helps you be very realistic when it comes to those fight scenes and things, which is great. And Hallee, you write in multiple genres. So why did you decide that this was something you wanted to invest time in now?
I wanted to write special forces, and I wanted it to not just be a boy meets girl. I wanted to highlight the amazing men that are in that type of military unit, and just really like dig deep into who they are and why they are. And the best way to do that is to give them circumstances where they can really show where they can shine.
Absolutely. And you did it. And I love the dedication in your book.
Oh, yeah.
Because the dedication is two men who filled that role in your life.
Yeah, my dad is former special forces. He's retired Army Sergeant Major, and my husband is still in the military and was in the special forces. So
that's great. And that's kind of a segue to the next question of what inspired this particular book. So we'll start with you, Hallee.
Again, I think it was because these two men in my life who are so, they're just such amazing men, and having the opportunity to kind of bring them together into fictional characters was just a lot of fun. And I get tired of the way that Hollywood and some authors just don't do justice to the military. I wanted to give a realistic military story instead of something that's like really out of ordinary, out of norm, because the normal is just as exciting as what you can exaggerate in a different kind of story.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the things I'm really loving about this story, because my dad served in the military, he served in 2 conflicts. And so there's always a part of me that's like going to be drawn to those type of stories when they're done well. And I feel like I'm just immersed in it. So
Thank
Melissa,
you.
what was it that attracted you to say, I want to write a book that's going to focus on human trafficking? Why that issue? Why this story?
I think there's not nearly enough focus on this major problem that we have in our society. It's just kind of ignored. And I wanted to write something, I wanted it to be clean. This doesn't go into any nasty, gory, gross, you understand what happened to her, and we don't need to get into, the specifics, because I don't want to read that. And I don't want to write that. But it's still, it's something that I wanted to really shine a light on. And then I really wanted to write Liliana because I tend to write very, very strong females. And I wanted to show a very strong female from a different perspective. She's not like this badass kind of kick your butt kind of girl. She doesn't know any of that stuff, but she's still so incredibly strong in this beautiful way.
And that definitely came through as I was reading her story, the way that she's someone who's been victimized, and that could make her seem very weak, but she's such a survivor, and that part makes her so strong. It was really incredible, because it would be very easy to go the other direction. with her.
Yes.
And Patricia, what about deception? What was it that made you go, this is the next story?
Well, in Standoff, Clayton was actually a suspect. And so I wanted to redeem him. And I gave him, of course, he had a gambling addiction and an alcoholic problem. And I wanted to show how he dealt with that. And then how he reacted. And he was also a womanizer in the past. And what would happen if he fell in love, how he would deal with it, and which he did.
Yeah, well, and it's, when you talk about him like that, it's like, how can he become heroic? And yet he does. And so
Yeah.
I love how that mirrors what happens in our lives with Christ. You know, the whole idea of we can start in one place, but over time, God can completely change our story and rewrite it. So this is a question that's always fun to ask, especially for romantic suspense authors. Are you a plotter or a pantser? Melissa.
Oh, I am a hardcore plotter. I am not by the seat of my pants kind of girl. I need to know what is happening.
That's awesome. And that was very definitive. You're like, I am definitely this way. Hallee, how are you when you write?
I used to be a pantser. I wrote 15 books that way, but then I had to write an 8-book series that were all the same event told from 8 different points of view. So it required plotting, and I had to train myself to plot. And I was like this epiphany, like, wow, this was much easier. So from then on, and it's not, I don't sit down and say Roman numeral 1, you know, I just basically say in this chapter, this happens, in this chapter, this happens. And then, you know, that's how I plot.
That's awesome. And I love that journey of pantser, and then you had to, and all of a sudden a light bulb goes off, because it's really interesting. People, even in romantic suspense, write both ways. And so it's a very, very personal process. How about you, Pat?
Well, I started out like Hallee, Melissa, a plotter. I had a little graph, and I put each chapter, and somewhere along the way that just quit working. And now I'm actually, this last book, I went back and I used plot points and pinch points, and that's all I knew is basically, and I didn't always know ahead, because I'm basically a pantser now. I have to know my characters. I have to know why the crime happens now and not 6 months ago, or 6 months in the future, or 10 years ago. Why now? And then I go from there.
I love that.
And it's always
what?
A surprise.
Yeah.
I hardly ever know who did it till the end.
I don't know about you, but there are a lot of people who write romantic suspense who are like, once I know what happens, I don't need to write it anymore. And so they're definitely pantsers. And I love how you're kind of the flip. You started as a plotter and now you're a pantser. Hallee started as a pantser, now she's a plotter. And Melissa's always just been, I know exactly what's going to happen. And that's such a great representation. I mean, writing is very personal, and our process is personal, and it can change and evolve. What works for one book doesn't necessarily work for the other. So this is kind of a fun question. If you could spend a day with a popular author or an author that you really enjoy, who would that be? Melissa, who would you pick and why?
That's a hard one, because most of my favorite authors are dead. So
okay, imagine you could go back in time. Who would you spend time
Charlotte Bronte, absolutely. Love Charlotte Bronte, love Jane Eyre. And she has a little bit of that. It's not a suspense book necessarily, but she has that darkness to it, you know, that I really like. So she's a big influence, especially that one particular book.
Awesome. How about you, Patricia? Who would you spend time with?
I would go spend a day with Susan May Warren. She and Rachel Hawk basically taught me how to write. They're deep thinkers. And because I in fact, from the first year to the second year, I was the most improved writer at their retreat. So I learned so much from them, and I could definitely learn some more. I don't think a writer ever quits learning.
Yeah. And that's why I love writing, because I'm like, the moment I think that I've arrived, it's time for me to stop, because then my books are all going to feel the same, and that's not a good
Right.
thing. How about you, Hallee? Who would you spend time with?
When I read that question in the email you sent, I came up with like 30 names, but I kept coming back to one, which is very strange. Because I'm a little weird, but Rex Stout.
Oh,
Um,
okay. Why?
He wrote Nero Wolfe mysteries from the 40s until the 70s. And I think he was autistic. And I'm pretty sure that his main character was. And I would love to just, like, one of his books, the publisher after his death found like drawings he had made of the brownstone where Nero Wolfe lived. And like, I've studied those, like trying to get into his head a little bit. And I would just love to just, have dinner with him.
Yeah. Oh, that's really fun. And I think there's something too, when you see someone who has written over a lifetime like that, would be so fascinating to be like, okay, what kept you writing? How did you keep coming up with ideas? All of those kinds of things, in addition to all the great reasons you already listed. So when we all write in different ways, but we also have different schedules. So like right now, I've got lots of deadlines, and I'm doing something I've never done before, where I'm actually getting up early to write, so I can get at least 500, 1,000 words done. And then I only have another 500, 1,000 to do at the end of the day. So that can be fluid too. But what's your schedule like when you're writing, when you're under deadline? Hallee, I'll start with you on that one.
I am most creative the earliest possible. So if I can start writing at 4 a.m, I can get the most writing done by 6. So between 4 and 6 is my like peak, write as fast as I can. And I can get sometimes 5,000 or 6,000 words in that time period. So
wow,
I'm no good after like 3 or 4 in the afternoon. I can't, I'm just incapable of it. So I had to do some last minute changes to the prequel book I wrote for the upcoming Revell series. And I started them last night at like 7 o'clock, and my husband was finishing editing them this morning. And he's like, there were a lot of typos. And I said, dude, it was like 8 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
What do you expect? I couldn't even read it over. I just had to write it. It's there.
Yeah, fix it. Go make it.
Yeah, you can fix that. That's fine.
Oh, that's so interesting. My friend Tricia Goyer does a lot of writing early in the morning. And for me, if I'm writing at 6, I'm like, yeah, this is early. But everybody's schedule is different. What's yours, Patricia?
If I'm on deadline, I usually get up 5 or 5:30. I can't get up at 4. And so, I'll do like a nifty 350 or 500, like from James Scott Bell. That's another one I'd like to spend a day with. But and then I'll write to a word count, which is usually anywhere from 15, whatever Scrivener tells me I have to have before my deadline. That's what I write to. And then, but I can write late at night. A lot of times I will go so far, and then I'm just stuck, and I'll stop a while, and I can come back on 8 or 9 and work till 10 or 11, sometimes even 12. I reset, I guess. I don't know, but
Yeah.
But to me, if you show up, it's gonna come.
Yeah, and that is a key, just that consistently showing up and then finding that rhythm that works for you. So Melissa, what's your kind of sweet spot for writing when you're on deadline?
Well, it used to be writing in the evenings after work, but I had a baby 4 months ago, so my schedule just went.
Yeah.
So right now it's just whenever I can. I have a notebook in my nightstand, so I'll jot some stuff down then, just whenever I can.
And that's the reality of life. When I started, my husband was working on a grad degree. We had 2 kids that were in bed at 8. And so I would start writing at 8:30 and go till 10 or 10:30. Then they got older. We had more kids. It was 10:30 to midnight. Then we had teenagers, and they want to talk from 11 to midnight. And so, learning just to grab those moments, I think, is so important, because life sometimes is just chaotic. And that's one of the things about writing. You can kind of pigeonhole it in when you need to. So when you're writing, do you have a favorite snack or drink that you have beside you? Like, I've got my iced tea right now. And often I'll have coffee and almonds. but do y'all have something? So Pat, do you have a go-to?
Coffee. And that's all. I don't eat when I do not eat while I'm writing, but I do drink coffee. Probably about 6 cups a day, 7.
That's why you can write early in the morning and from 9 to 10. Melissa, how about you?
I don't really do a lot of eating or drinking while I write, so yeah, no.
You're head down and efficient.
Yeah.
Hallee, I know you do lots of coffee videos. Is that what your go-to?
No, I drink coffee in the morning, but that's it. I'll tell you a secret. Well, not a secret, but I used to smoke, and like every time I would pause writing, I would smoke. Long time ago, like 18 years ago. So I still like, that's where the trigger is for me. And so I have a tall glass of water with a straw. And so when I pause, I reach for my glass of water with the straw. And like 18 years later, it's still, oh, I need this, something going into my mouth. But I don't eat while I'm writing it. I just drink water.
Yeah, y'all are so healthy. I had a panel a couple of weeks ago where it was peanut M&Ms. Was like 3 of them. We're like, that's my go-to. So y'all are much healthier than that. Go you. That's awesome. So how many hours a day do you write on average? Hallee, how many do you write? Is it just that morning block, or do you spread it out across?
It's just that morning block, 2 hours.
Yeah, and you get a lot done in that 2 hours. That's
I
awesome.
do. Yeah, and then I homeschool and I have a full-time job. So
yeah, and so
that's all I get. That's all you get. 2 hours.
Well, and then you realize you learn your pacing and you learn how fast you can go.
Oh yeah.
And how to be most efficient with that.
Yeah.
Patricia, what's your pace on deadline?
Whatever it takes. Just because I live by myself, and so I can write anytime, and so I write until I reach my word count, whatever that is. So sometimes it's 10 o'clock at night, but
you will get there and you will get it done.
I will.
And Melissa, I know life is chaotic right now because life with a newborn is the definition of chaos.
Yeah.
But in like an ideal world, how many hours a day do you write? Or how do you manage that while you're on deadline?
An hour or 2, just depending.
Yeah. I mean, normally I've had homeschooling, working jobs, and writing. And so you just learn to grab it and be really efficient. So does writing energize or exhaust you? Melissa, I'll start with you on this one.
I think it depends on what I'm writing. If I'm writing this really interesting, wonderful scene that I've been excited to write since I started the book, then I'll just be like all energized. But if it's the part that I'm trying to like make it interesting for myself, then yeah, it might take me down a little bit.
Yeah. Hallee, how about you?
It depends on the perspective I'm writing. Sometimes when I'm in the head of someone who's truly evil, it can exhaust me. And I'll have to just like keep my writing short for that day because I can't do much of it. But then sometimes even exhausted, I'm energized with the creation of the story.
Yeah, I love that. And I hadn't thought about it because for me, when I'm writing the bad guy POV, usually that's the point in a book where I'm stuck and I pause and I go write a bunch of bad guy POV scenes. And then for some reason, that'll get me going again. It's like I now understand why the crime happened or why all this stuff was going on or something. And that can help kind of unlock me. So I often will save those bad guy point of view scenes because I generally have an idea of what they're doing and why. But I don't know that I've written like truly evil bad guys. I don't know. Patricia, how about you? Energize or exhaust you?
A little bit of both. I mean, physically I get tired, but mentally, when I nail a scene, it's like there's no high quite like it. When you get when what's in your head halfway comes out on the computer, it energizes me.
It's magic, isn't it? It's just such a good feeling. Those are the days I'm like, God, this is fun.
Yeah.
Kind of counterbalances all those days where I'm like, I'm beating my head against a wall, waiting for it to all come together.
It's the worst book ever.
Yeah, exactly. And normally that's, I don't know about y'all, when do you hit that worst book ever moment? For me, it's usually between like halfway to 2/3.
Yeah.
Where I'm just like, I don't know why I thought this was a good idea.
I call that
Definitely,
hitting
yeah.
the wall.
Yeah. Hallee, do you hit yours at about the same point?
Yeah, about
or-
the same. Yeah. And then when it's done and I go back and read it, I'm always so surprised at how good it is. It's like, oh, I did it.
I know. And that's
This
the
worked.
best feeling when you're like, hey, I am kind of good at this. It worked out. So Melissa, do you ever hit a point where you're just like, I can't believe anybody agreed to let me write?
Sometimes, somewhere about half or a little bit before is usually, yeah. But then I'll just stop and reread it from the beginning, and then I'm okay again.
Yeah, that can help too, because I think sometimes, especially with the longer books, it's easy to forget what we've already written and be like, where is this thing going? Even if we're a plotter, you can still be like, I don't know if this is working anymore. How about you, Patricia? Do you hit a point where you're just like, this is drivel?
Usually I hit the wall at 30,000 and then again at 60. And I usually just go back and start over. Because you can't help it. It's like you said, why did I ever think this was a good idea?
Yeah. Well, and I think it's funny though, because each of us has been able to go, it happens at this point. It's like, we know it's coming. And so that should make it easier because we know it's going to come and we know how to push through it. But there are still those days where I'm like, man, they're going to ask for the advance back. This is just a bad idea. So if you could be mentored by a famous author, who would you choose? Patricia.
Again, Susan May
Yeah,
Warren,
Susie.
I think Rachel, both of them. They write such good books and they just have so much knowledge, both of them.
Yeah. Melissa, how about you? If you could pick anyone to be your writing mentor, who would it be?
Charlotte Bronte. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I know she's gone, but you know,
a pattern here.
I'll resurrect her.
And Hallee, you mentor so many. Who would you go to for mentoring?
In an unusual name, I would say Nora Roberts.
Okay, yeah.
I don't read her anymore. I haven't read her kind of book in years and years. However, she was like my favorite for so long. And I love the way that she paces and I love the way that she writes men. And I would love to just hear her, just sit at her feet and just listen to her talk about what goes on in her head when she writes. Even though I haven't read a book of hers in probably 18 or 19 years.
Yeah. And again, you know, a very prolific writer. For a long time, I would have said someone like Mary Higgins Clark, because grew up reading a lot of hers. That's when I remember when I went into a Christian bookstore and I found Brandolyn Collins and Colleen Coble, I went, oh, I can actually write that kind of book in the way that I want to. And it was like this light bulb moment. I'm like, oh, there is romantic suspense that doesn't have to have, you know, over too much gore or the overt scenes and things like that. Because I've always loved those books and those prolific writers. And how do you do it? So last question. If you could be a character in one of your favorite books, who would you be? Melissa.
Don't know. Because I don't want to be Jane Eyre, that poor child. She went through heck. I would probably pick one of my own characters, as horrible as that may sound, but never miss the female lead character, Cadence. I really liked her. She was so, pardon the language, badass. I just loved her.
Yeah. She is an amazing, you know, strong female lead. A really, she gave me almost Black Widow vibes in some ways. And so I could definitely see that. How about you, Hallee?
Laura Ingalls Wilder.
Yeah.
It was my dream as a kid that I would be her one day. And even now, if I just want a lovely story to read, I'll go read these Happy Golden Years.
Yes. I just re-listened to those like a year ago with my youngest, and it was so fun because I must have read those series, you know, 4 or 5 times easily.
I'm probably at 30.
Yeah, that's amazing. And they're just good stories.
Yeah.
How about you, Patricia?
Probably Isles or Rizzoli and Isles because I love her job. I love that series. I like Hallee, I haven't read one in a long time, but the last ones I read, I really enjoyed, and I always liked her. So, and I like what she does. So
That's so
I don't
fun.
know why I like her. I don't know why I want to be a medical examiner, but it really would be neat, to solve crimes like that.
Yeah, that's why I like reading about them. It's also why I went to law school and not medical school, because I can write that sort of, but I don't want to crack the ribs, and like your character did, Hallee, in this
Yeah.
book that's coming out. I'm like, ooh. But all right, well, thank you so much for joining me today. It's so fun to talk about our books and my favorite genre to read, and truly the three of you just launched to the top of my to be read pile every time you have a book come out. And so if you haven't read books by Patricia Bradley, Melissa Koslin, and Hallee Bridgeman, you really need to go look for them, because they write fantastic, immersive romantic suspense in all the best ways. So thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks for having.
Yeah.
This
It
was
was great.